Hello, and welcome back to Political-psych-abby, a channel where I talk about the psychology of politics. Given the content of this video, I'm not going to be doing any self-promotion in it, so I'll just tell you right now, please check out my social media and like and subscribe. Thanks. Also, if you feel like supporting the channel on Patreon, that's totally awesome. You get some cool perks and it does really help. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's get started. So, part of the reason there hasn't been a new video in a while is that I spent the summer teaching political psychology to a group of high schoolers. It was really cool to get to teach in person, plus if any of them made disrespectful comments, I could get them in trouble. I'm mostly kidding, you guys are mostly a great audience. Anyway, in the very first class, one of the students asked if we were going to cover the abortion debate. I actually hadn't planned on it, but I realized in that moment that I had to. I also realized that I should probably cover it here too. For my class, I covered the psychology of the abortion debate at the end of my lecture on benevolent and hostile sexism. And this video can be considered an addendum to my video on benevolent and hostile sexism. Honestly, I cannot believe I did not think to cover abortion directly in that video. In my defense, that video was already 41 minutes long. In light of all that, in this video, I'm mostly going to be covering abortion from the perspective of benevolent and hostile sexism, which won't give a complete picture, but does give a different and valuable perspective on the issue. So that you don't have to watch my longer video on ambivalent sexism first, I will briefly define the components of ambivalent sexism, which are benevolent and hostile sexism. Basically, benevolent sexism, or BS, gotta love that acronym, consists of a set of assumptions about women that might seem complementary, but are actually limiting. For example, the view of women as inherently more nurturing than men is benevolently sexist because being nurturing isn't bad, but ascribing that quality to women as a whole causes one to view them as suited for certain gender roles and reinforces patriarchal structures. Basically, the person who does or thinks something benevolently sexist does not do it out of a hatred that they are aware of. Hostile sexism consists of more overtly negative views about women. Importantly, different situations can lead to different women receiving hostile or benevolent sexism, but benevolent sexism is never actually good. Also, many people are both benevolently sexist and hostilely sexist, but BS is more common in women than hostile sexism is. Alright, let's talk about abortion. First off, I will admit my own bias. I am pro-choice in basically all scenarios, but you probably already guessed that from the overall vibe of this channel. It is not my goal with this video to persuade anti-choice people of my views, and I will not debate you in the comments, but I do encourage you to stick around. My goal here is to explain the psychology of the anti-choice position so that knowledge can be applied by pro-choice activists. You might be wondering why I'm using the terms pro and anti-choice instead of terms like pro-life and pro and anti-abortion. I don't use the term pro-life as I do not believe that a cluster of cells is the same thing as a person. But also, many so-called pro-life activists advocate policies which would lead to the deaths of a lot of pregnant women. I don't use the terms pro and anti-abortion because it is different than that. I, and many other pro-choice people, don't actually specifically want abortions to happen. We want people to be able to make choices about their bodies and lives, and to be able to access health care. In addition, attempting to decrease the number of abortions by providing, say, better social services could technically be anti-abortion without necessarily being anti-choice. I do also want to say before we fully get into things that I acknowledge that people who do not identify as women can become pregnant, and those people's identities are valid. The reason I use the term woman, other than for simplicity's sake, and focus on attitudes towards women, is that perceptions of pregnancy, motherhood, and abortion are very closely linked to perceptions of womanhood. In addition, the point of this video is to understand the psychology of anti-choice people, and those people are unlikely to conceptualize anyone who can get pregnant as anything other than a woman. Although obviously I don't want to assert that their conceptualization is correct here. Alright, with that caveat out of the way, let's dive into things. I think it's important to provide context in terms of how many people hold different positions on abortion in the United States. This issue is often presented as having two equal sides, but numbers-wise, that just isn't true. Osborne et al. Analyzed American opinion on a variety of abortion scenarios. 43.8% of Americans sampled were consistently pro-choice, but only 14.8% were consistently anti-choice, and even those people had a 1/4 chance of supporting abortion if a woman's health was in danger. They're doing some kind of nuanced statistics here, but the main point is that people have more than two possible views on abortion, and that the proportion of Americans who are truly opposed to abortion in every instance is very small. In order to reflect how people think about this issue more accurately, it is common to divide abortions into two types. The first of these types is traumatic abortions, meaning that carrying the pregnancy to term jeopardizes the woman's health, there is a strong chance of birth defects, or the pregnancy is the result of rape. It's important to keep in mind that this does not mean that the abortion itself is traumatic. In fact, in almost all traumatic abortions, the abortion is a way of avoiding additional trauma. The other type is an elective abortion, in which a woman has some other reason to not want to carry the pregnancy to term. Okay, now that we've defined the terms, let's get to the core of things. Surprisingly, Osborne et al. Found in their meta-analysis that benevolent sexism, not hostile sexism, best explained opposition to abortion. What this essentially means is that people who are anti-choice do not necessarily hate women as much as they want to control them, which is still bad, but in a different way. The conceptualization of women as inherently maternal is really key to this. Viewing women as motherly or maternal is not inherently hostile. There are certainly some people who would be flattered to be viewed as maternal. The issue here is viewing women as inherently bound for roles as mothers. For people who buy into this form of BS gender role, abortion is seen as a massive violation of this role. Tragically, a mother's suffering is seen as a noble aspect of this gender role. Osborne et al. Used the chilling term sacrificial mothers. While I do think parents should be willing to sacrifice for their children, the fixation on the sacrificial mother in the anti-choice movement goes far beyond that. Many in this movement oppose traumatic abortions because they believe that it is a woman's role to suffer for her quote-unquote child, even if that child is just a collection of cells, even if that child has no real chance at living, and even if that suffering includes the woman's death, or more suffering than she could possibly handle. When I was trying to decide on the image to represent the sacrificial mother here, I was originally thinking of using something from a horror movie. And then it dawned on me that the best example was actually from something that's supposed to be a love story. I think that actually encapsulates something important about this. This image is Bella from Twilight, who is being killed by the vampire fetus within her and is portrayed as heroic for continuing the pregnancy. She does end up living, as does the baby, who is perfectly healthy, aside from crippling CGI-itis, because it's not the sort of story where the heroine dies a pointless death. Unfortunately, it's not like most women going through pregnancy complications can cure themselves with vampire blood. It just isn't covered under most insurance. It is also worth noting that this story was written by a woman who is also a mother. The connection between benevolent sexism and anti-choice attitudes is one of the reasons why the discrepancy between men and women on this issue is not as big as you might expect. Because, unfortunately, women commonly hold benevolently sexist attitudes. FYI, the intention of this video is definitely not to call out Stephenie Meyer specifically. That's not the sort of thing this channel is for. Twilight was just too good an illustrative example to pass up. We should also ask whether hostile sexism, or in other words, hating women, connects to opposition to abortion. Well, Osborne et al. Did find a connection between opposition to elective abortion and hostile sexism. They hypothesized that this is because women who seek elective abortions are choosing to deviate from gender roles. Traditional views on gender tie womanhood and motherhood very closely together and also look down on female sexual liberation. It is typical for women and others who deviate from traditional gender roles to receive more hostile sexism. Osborne et al. Also hypothesized that part of the connection here is that people tend to connect elective abortion with feminism and feminists often incur a lot of hostile sexism. Yet again, this comes back to a perceived violation of gender roles. I should mention that some studies have found no connection between hostile sexism and abortion attitudes, and one study I'm aware of found no connection between benevolent sexism and abortion attitudes. However, in this video, I'm attempting to focus on the most common conclusions and those drawn from a meta-analysis. Meta-analyses are studies of studies, so they have a larger sample size and are less likely to fall victim to any weirdness of sample or methodology that might affect one study. I am not intending to be dismissive of dissenting studies, just trying to present what is most likely the truth based on existing evidence. What is most likely is that benevolent sexism influences attitudes towards both elective and traumatic abortions, and that hostile sexism primarily influences attitudes towards elective abortions. That means that we should probably examine the benevolently sexist views held by anti-choice people and relating to the issue. Fortunately, Dirksen and Lawson have done just that. I should mention that their sample is Canadian, but given that patriarchy is patriarchy on both sides of the border, I imagine the results will carry oop and over. I should also mention that my choice to use interviews with anonymous research participants rather than high-profile activists or organizations is deliberate. I am seeking to communicate the attitudes of a group rather than the rhetoric of their leaders. I'm also trying to avoid strawmanning, as well as whatever the opposite of strawmanning is, like presenting a position as more coherent and reasonable than it typically is. Does anyone know what that's called? Comment below. Also, this is a nice way to avoid platforming official anti-choice rhetoric more than I need to in a quest to understand this. The authors interviewed a number of people with anti-choice views and found three main themes: protective paternalism, complementary gender differentiation, and the categorization of women. I'm going to go through some quotes that illustrate these attitudes now. FYI, while there isn't anything graphic, these might be unpleasant to listen to for some people. I'll put in chapter markers, so just skip to the conclusion if you don't feel like hearing this today. Alright, so let's start with protective paternalism. This has very little to do with actually protecting women from physical or emotional harm. It's actually about protecting them from getting to make their own choices. You can't see it because I'm not on camera, but I was just making the biggest air quotes there. Protective paternalism influences views on abortion a number of ways. One of these is the assumption that women will experience grief after an abortion, and that they should be protected from that grief. One participant described it as,
I would almost say it's like a death of someone in their family. Just that real grieving process. I don't think there'd be any relief. I think that it's a loss, not just as if someone's died in your life, but also like you were the reason for it.
It is important to assert that this grief and regret is not a common post-abortion experience. So this is an effort to quote-unquote protect women from something that rarely happens. One of the participants said the following about regret.
When the baby is there, you take it for granted that I could be able to get pregnant, I had the possibility, I was capable to do that. When you lose the baby, there are risks of never getting pregnant. And you maybe regret that, what if I just had my baby?
Shame is another thing that anti-choice advocates claim to want to protect women from. Although, of course, they are responsible for much of the shame women who get abortions may feel. One participant described it as,
They feel ashamed that they shouldn't have done it, or they shouldn't have gotten pregnant, and all these things. It breaks my heart.
it is also common for anti-choice people to assert that any relief a woman might feel post-abortion is false. There is this infantilizing assumption that women cannot accurately convey or judge their own experiences and emotions. One anti-choice participant said the following in reference to the Shout Your Abortion hashtag.
They're grieving silently and putting up a brave, strong face that they are proud of their abortion. Like, I also grieve with them because it's possible that they are grieving silently.
This honestly just comes off as so condescending. There was also some but less frequent discussion of women experiencing other negative emotions, including guilt, fear, and trauma. The real takeaway here is that the protective attitude towards women is based on not trusting them to make their own choices and understand their own experiences, and that these protective attitudes do not actually protect women at all, but instead control and infantilize them. That is not to say that no woman has ever had a bad or even horrible experience with getting an abortion, but these experiences are not the majority and do not justify taking away this choice. Anti-choice views also frequently relate to beliefs in complementary gender differentiation. That's basically fancy social science talk for gender roles. In the context of the abortion debate, it means that anti-choice people believe that women would not naturally choose abortion because women are made to be mothers. Because of this, women who seek abortions are often seen as misled, coerced, or lacking in other choices. One participant described how they believe women were misled thusly.
I think that in most cases, women were truly looking for the best decision to make and were maybe given wrong or misleading information.
I should point out here that most wrong or misleading information about this issue is pushed by anti-choice activists. Sometimes they're even able to legally force others to give out this false information. Another participant described how they believed women are coerced into abortions this way.
You do know that it's often, in the majority of cases of women getting abortions, it's not always. The choice has been pushed on them. They've never actually had the choice. You know that, right?
Yet again, this is not true, but it is what anti-choice people tend to believe. Anti-choice people also tend to believe that women who get abortions must feel like they have no other choices, with one participant saying,
They feel like they have no other choice than to get an abortion. And really, that's not making a decision. That's being forced into something they don't really want. She's being forced by the idea that the only way she can finish her education is if she gets an abortion. Or she's being forced by the fear that she won't have enough money to pay for food or rent, or that she'll end up homeless. This is where I think our society has really failed women, because they have been told that having a baby in any situation like that is going to ruin their life. Women in these situations don't feel supported to have the child that they maybe have already fallen in love with.
This is the hardest of these quotes for me to entirely disagree with. I absolutely think that we as a society should provide more support to parents and children. But this takes it much farther than that. Here there is an assumption that any woman given the choice wants to become a mother, and that's simply not true. In addition, in the US at least, being anti-choice tends to overlap with being opposed to the sort of programs that would actually provide an alternative to abortion or poverty. I agree, abortion or poverty is a horrifying choice, and I want to live in a society in which no one has to get an abortion in order to avoid poverty. However, it is better to have that choice than to just force people into poverty or further into poverty. What is interesting is that arising from this notion that women are not really making a free, informed choice to get abortions is a belief among some anti-choice people that women who get abortions should not be punished or judged. Although, of course, we see this view as not universal as more and more places institute punishments for women who get abortions. However, this may be the reason that some anti-abortion activists target abortion providers more than abortion seekers. The final way that anti-choice thinking connects to ambivalent sexism is the categorization of women. Participants stereotype women who seek abortions as young, childless, and promiscuous, thus viewing abortion as separate from family, femininity, and motherhood. To quote Dirksen and Lawson, failing to acknowledge that a woman can simultaneously fulfill a traditional role and choose abortion serves to classify women who choose abortion into an inferior category. Of course, though, these things are not as separate as many anti-choice activists would have you believe. Many women who seek abortions do already have children. Many are in committed monogamous relationships or married, and many are older. This categorization may also be why anti-choice activists rarely discuss women who seek abortions for health reasons. Still, abortion seekers are stereotyped as young, as in,
These young girls, they get pregnant. It's got to be terrifying for them. Can you imagine, what am I going to do? Are my parents going to disown me?
participants were baffled by the idea of women who already had children getting abortions, with one participant saying,
If a woman had 3 kids and had an abortion and had 3 more kids, honestly, it would be like, how? I'd almost want to do a study on these people to understand how they justify it.
The eagerness to classify abortion seekers as promiscuous is also clear, with participants saying gross things like,
Really, have a little bit of self control. I don't know, less drugs, less booze, and you won't get pregnant?
So yeah, as you can see, it's not so much that anti-choice people hate women, at least not all women, as that they hold a number of incorrect but deeply ingrained beliefs about women. If I had to boil down those beliefs into their simplest forms, I would say that they are 1. A woman is inherently made to be a mother, and to seek to not be one is wrong and unnatural, and 2. A woman can't be trusted to make her own choices. If we want to bring anti-choice people over to the pro-choice side, we need to dispel these beliefs. If these beliefs cannot be dispelled, then these people must be organized around and circumvented. Fortunately, we do outnumber them by a lot. I wish I could leave you with some message of togetherness and how we all really want the same and best things, but that would be dishonest. Truth be told, anti-choice people really do view women in a very different way than most of you probably do. We really don't all think the same. Thanks for watching, and thanks to Sky Mocha, Ryan Bruno, and Brett Block for lending their lovely voices to these horrible quotes. If you want to hear them say nice things, check out their various projects linked in the description. Big thank you to my patrons. If you want to support the channel and get some fun things like stickers or your pet in the credits, you can check out my Patreon. There's a link in the description. Alright, hope to see you all next time. Hopefully it won't be so long before my next video.